Hey everyone, this is Peter, one of the hosts of Cobra Kai Kompanion. This is interview number 14 with Matt Lewis from October 8th, 2018, the first interview of Cobra Kai Kompanion.
Hey there, my name is Matt Lewis. I play Ron, the president of the All Valley Karate Tournament Committee on Cobra Kai, and you are listening to the first episode of Cobra Kai Kompanion. Thanks for tuning in.
Welcome to another episode of Cobra Kai Kompanion. My name is Peter, one of the hosts of the show, and today's episode is an interview with Mr. Matt Lewis, who you heard at the top of the show. And not only did we, talk about Cobra Kai, because that's why you're tuning in, but we talked a lot about what he has done previously before getting into acting. He teaches acting. Well, he teaches. First and foremost, he is a professor, but some of my favorite parts that you'll hear about is a time when he was younger, when he skateboarded and also played in a band. So that's what I enjoy about doing these interviews, is finding out more about the actors themselves on the show. And he sounds like he, grew up being a big fan of, the movies that he references as well, and, some of the people that he has worked with. And this is the episode.
Hello.
Hey, Mr. Lewis, it's Peter.
Hey, Peter, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. Thanks for calling.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any questions for me before we get started?
I don't think so.
Okay. I don't know if you've checked out any of the episodes. Basically, we'll just learn about you as a person and before we get into talking about your role on Cobra Kai.
Cool. Sounds good.
Okay, great. I see that you have a background in many things, actually, including theater. Can you talk about how you got into theater? Because I understand you also teach acting.
Yeah, absolutely. It was sort of the family business. My dad was a theater professor, and he ran a theater program that he actually founded in the mid 80s at a community college in North Carolina, at Guilford Technical Community College. And it's a small 2-year associate's degree program. But when he started teaching there was no program, and he started it from the ground up. And by the time he retired, almost 30 years later, it was a fully fledged theater program with its own theater and facilities, and he spearheaded that whole thing. And so when I was in middle school, he had just started the program, and they were doing a summer play called The Foreigner, which is a pretty classic contemporary American comedy written by a playwright named Larry Shue, and he needed me to be in it. It was a small program. He had cast everybody he could. He was in it. And so he said, "Hey, this summer, do you want to be in this play? I kind of need you to be in this play." And I was like, "No, that sounds awful and horrifying. I don't want to go to work all summer with my dad. I want to skateboard with my friends." And
right.
So, no, I'll pass. And then he came back a couple weeks later and told me, he was fibbing, but he told me that they had already made the programs and my name was in it, and they had printed off thousands of them. And if I didn't do the play, they were going to have to throw them all away and he might get fired. So he tricked me into being in this play. But of course I had the time of my life. And so I started doing plays in a college program under the tutelage of my dad when I was in middle school and high school. And so that's how that started. And I studied theater as an undergrad, and I got my master's degree in acting in 2012 from the University of Alabama. And so I teach theater as, that's sort of my day job. I'm a part-time professor at Kennesaw State University. And then I've been here in Atlanta since 98, except for the 3 years that I went to grad school. And I've been doing theater for decades. But the tax incentive program that the state of Georgia provides to the film and television industry has caused a huge explosion in film and television work here. I mean, there's always been a little bit of work, and there's been commercials and stuff, but now so many things shoot in Georgia and in Atlanta specifically. And so really this past year, I haven't done a play in a year. I've been doing more on camera work than anything else lately, which has been great. And I mean, I love doing it all. So
yeah, Yeah, congratulations. I've seen some of your work on television here on your listing, and I mean, Ozark, right? I haven't caught on to Ozark yet, but I hear season 2 is amazing. House of Cards,
Oh, that's incredible.
obviously. Yeah, was a big Netflix hit, when that came out. So yeah, you've done a lot of work here. I want to go back a little bit. You mentioned skateboarding. You actually skateboarded back in the day too?
I did. I did. I skateboarded all through middle school, and I met my first girlfriend and fell in love and never touched my skateboard again. But I got a wild hair. I don't know if midlife crisis or whatever, but I got online a couple of months ago and bought myself a skateboard, and I've gone out and skated just a few times. There's a church parking lot across the street from my house, and I went over there and messed around a little bit. It turns out that I was 15 a long time ago, and so I've been trying to reteach myself how to ollie and the basics and stuff. But it's fun.
Did you ever catch that documentary? Gosh, what is it called? It's something like Dogtown and Z Boys, I believe it was.
I did. Yeah. That was definitely
Around the time you started?
in sort of the. Yeah, it might have been a little after that.
Oh, okay.
This would have been like the mid '80s. So this would have been like Animal Chin and Bones Brigade and Nadas and Christian Hosoi and that sort of era of the game.
I see. Okay. Those aren't names I'm familiar with, but I'm a big fan of the film Lords of Dogtown. So,
Oh yeah. Bones Brigade was like Tony Hawk and
oh, okay.
yeah, those guys.
I've heard of him. Yeah. Up and comer, right? He's got
exactly.
a few video games he's got. Now, you also mentioned University of Alabama. I want to give a little shout out to Miss Erin Bradley Danger, who also attended. When she was on the show, she threw a little shout out to Roll Tide. So I know, I've heard of that. I know that's a thing.
That is a thing. Well, it's funny because, usually, not always, but usually theater kids and jocks in high school are in sort of two different universes, and
Right.
those universes cross over quite often, as they should. But it's not uncommon to be part of a theater program on a college campus and see that the majority of the students involved in the theater program don't really care about sports. It's not uncommon. I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing. It's just sort of the way it is. But it's funny at Alabama because their football team is so good to watch the incoming freshmen come in and see all of the rest of us that have been there for a while freak out when football season starts, and for them to slowly become indoctrinated into excitement, because it's just so, on a home game day in Tuscaloosa, it's like Mardi Gras in New Orleans. I mean, just everything shuts down. The streets are filled. And it's just this sort of 24-hour celebration sort of focused around a football game. But the Bryant-Denny Stadium holds over 100,000 people. And then they usually have, so the stadium will be full. And then on top of that, depending on the opposing team, somewhere between 20 and 60,000 more people just on campus. They don't even go in the stadium because they don't have tickets. So it's just it's really exciting, fun thing.
Now, is your guys' school the something about a tree? Is there some kind of like tradition with a really big tree? Am I mistaken?
That's our you're close. That's our in-state rival, Auburn University.
Oh, I see. My apologies.
No, it's all good. It's interesting that you knew that. They had these big trees, and it was called Toomer's Corner. And for decades, their tradition at Auburn, anytime they won a game, was to roll the trees, throw a bunch of toilet paper up in the trees. And then there was this crazy guy, I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but there was this crazy Alabama fan, and he poisoned those trees.
Oh, wow.
And then he called this famous talk show called the Paul Feinbaum Program and told Paul Feinbaum what he did. And so the feds tracked him down, and he got arrested. And I don't know, I'm pretty sure he went to jail for it. I don't remember what happened. But the dude killed the trees, and they actually had to cut them down.
Oh, wow.
Not too long ago. they've replaced them with new trees. But yeah, it's a pretty heated in-state rival.
Yeah.
I would say it's one of the biggest for sure.
Yeah, the reason I remember something like that is because I'm from Portland, Oregon, and so the Oregon Ducks are
Okay.
huge here. And there
Sure.
was, I forget what year it was, but it was definitely a few years back, and it was between those two teams, and I think Oregon wanted, well, we didn't make it to the Nationals that year, but I know we wanted to play Alabama to kind of solidify, like, hey, Oregon is a legit team. And we just,
Sure.
I think we made 2 appearances to the Nationals and lost each time, but it's just one of those things, like, we could never get big players, in the Pacific Northwest. We have a bunch of vegans and,
Right.
maybe
Right.
that's what it is.
Sure.
But we could never get the local boys who are like huge, like the Alabama guys. But I'm sure we've made some people go cross-eyed with football talk. But you have you have a lot of credit in theater. There's a few that really stick out. From musical to comedy and even Shakespearean. One that I would like to have you talk about is Ghost the musical.
Ghost the musical. That is, of course, a musical that's based on a film, and it ran on Broadway around 2012 or something like that, and it had an okay run, but it wasn't amazingly successful. It had this like sort of soaring rock score. It sounded like a lot of like power ballads, like Journey or something like that. The music was similar to that. And it just sort of, that style of music didn't really seem to fit the show perfectly. And I think that was one of the reasons why it initially wasn't so successful. But then the creative team went back and they retooled it, and they pared those songs down into more sort of acoustic chamber-like songs, because it's about this love story,
Right.
and there can only be so many epic power ballads about how you miss your dead husband. And so they retooled the music and made it make more sense. And then what happens when a play or a musical closes on Broadway or wherever it premiered, eventually those rights will be released to leasing companies all over the world, and then those plays can be produced regionally. But if it's running on Broadway, you can't do that. It's why, like, you couldn't go to your local Equity Theater and see a production of The Lion King. It's still on Broadway, and those rights haven't been released yet. It tours, but so when the rights were released for Ghost, a local theater in Atlanta called George Ensemble Theater chose to produce it as part of their season, and I got to be in it. It's sort of a sad story. It ended up being, almost positive, the last play that the artistic director of George Ensemble Theater got to direct. His name was Bob Farley, and he passed away suddenly. That season, it was a couple of years ago, was going to be his last season as artistic director before he retired and passed the baton over to the next person as far as him being in charge of that theater. And so I got to work with Uncle Bob one last time, and then he passed shortly after that.
Oh, wow. So that's, we'll start to hear that. The music, you talked a little bit about that. Was it original music that they wrote for the show?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, because, when I think of Ghost, I don't think rock. You know what I mean? Just because of the Righteous Brothers music, I feel tonally it would be a lot of, kind of like what you said, acoustic. So I would have thought it was a lot more soft music or something.
Exactly. And I think when they retooled it and made it more like that, it made more sense.
Right. What was the role that you had on that show?
I was in the ensemble, so that means that I had a lot of little roles. But if you're in the ensemble of a musical or really any play, quite often those are the hardest roles to have because you're playing multiple characters. You usually got a lot of costume changes. You got a lot of random things to remember that don't necessarily have anything to do with the narrative of the play. If you're the lead in a play, then of course there's this story arc that you can very easily track, and you're in most scenes, so you just sort of jump in and start, and then a couple hours later you're done. But if you're in the ensemble, you've got to remember that, after Act 1, Scene 2, you've got to go move a couch, and that's just sort of a random arbitrary thing. And then on top of that, and this is definitely the case in Ghost, that if you're in the ensemble, then you're singing and dancing in most of the songs. So there's a lot of extra choreography to learn and lots of songs to learn and all that stuff. But So I was that, and then I was also, I had a solo where I was the first guy that the main character sees after he dies, and he sort of shows up in this heaven-ish place. And I got to sing him a song explaining where he was and what was going on. I think it was called "You've Got to Let Go Now" or something like that. But my scene partner in that, his name is Chase Peacock, and he's a great local actor. He also he has worked on Broadway. He was in the ensemble of American Idiot, the Green Day musical that ran on Broadway a couple years ago, or maybe like 10 years ago, actually.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to see something like that, American Idiot. Now, what type of production do you have more fun in? Do you like doing the musicals, or do you, because I saw that you also did a part on Macbeth, so is Shakespeare there?
I did. I got to do 2 summers at Texas Shakespeare Festival, which was both of those seasons were amazing, and got to do quite a bit of Shakespeare while I was there. I'm not partial or impartial to any of it. I really like working, and I like the collaborative process of theater. I love, and I also hate the fact that when you start a production, especially if it's a good one, you make this really immediate family, and, you work really hard together for a lot of hours for a couple of months, but then when the show closes, it's just over. And there's no, maybe somebody pointed a camera at it and made a video, but watching theater on a videotape or on a video is terrible. Mm-hmm. And you could even remount the play the next year and have the exact same cast together, but you're going to be different people in a year. So it's just never going to be the same. It's like this, sometimes when it's great, it's just this perfect lightning in a bottle that you all captured together. And then when the play's over, you let it go, and you'll never see it again. So, obviously that sounds sort of sad, but I also love the fact that when you start a project in theater, you just sort of dive in head first and, make a family and try really hard to fall in love with each other and fall in love with the material and work as hard as you can. And that's just, whether it's Shakespeare or something contemporary or a musical or whatever, that's just icing on the cake. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I enjoy variety. If I had to do too much of the same thing over and over again, that might be not as much fun.
Right. Now, again, you're a man of many talents here. You've done theater. As of late, you've been making appearances in TV shows. What was it like being the lead singer of a rock band? Clocked in?
It was a blast.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. I had always been, I was a little punk rock skate rat in middle school and high school, which was a long time ago. But, I'd sung for a handful of bands, and I grew up in a town in North Carolina called Winston-Salem. And this was like mid-'80s. We had this really, really strong DIY punk and hardcore scene. We had our own club called New Start, and it moved around to a couple of different locations. But we had a ton of touring bands come through and play there. A band from Richmond called Avail used to play there all the time. Shelter, I don't know, just a ton, Mighty Mighty Boss Tones. Tons of bands came through there. And then as the local kids, we had bands and we would open up for them a lot of times. So that was something that I just sort of had done for a long time. And then I was in undergrad in North Carolina, and I decided to drop out and move to Atlanta with my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, and some other friends. And at the time, I was sort of on the fence about whether or not I really wanted to be an actor, and I kind of decided to try and let it go. And so I started bartending in the sports bar, and I saw an ad in a paper. This local band called Clocked In was, their original lead singer had just had a kid, and he wanted to quit the band. They weren't really touring or anything like that. They were just playing local shows, and they had a good following. But he decided that he wanted to let it go, and so they ran an ad in the paper looking for a new singer. And so I went and auditioned for him and booked the gig. And then we pulled our money and bought a van, and I would book these DIY tours for us, and we'd play in some coffee shops and skate shops and backyards and and some clubs. but we toured for probably 3 or 4 years. We made it out to California one time, so that was I think a 5-week tour. That was the biggest one we ever did. But yeah, and then we signed with this tiny label in New York called Radical Records, and they put out this one CD for us called Tied to the Mast, and that was a culmination of like 3 or 4 years work, and has most of the songs that we wrote on that. I think there were a few that never got recorded, but we were around. I was with the band from 2000 to 2004, and then we broke up. And then after that, I was just working in this bar again and still not acting. And I sort of thought, man, I could blink and be 60 and still work in this bar. So I maybe need to figure out what I'm really passionate about and follow up with that. And so I went back to undergrad and finished my bachelor's degree and started acting professionally in Atlanta while I was doing that. And then I went to grad school at Alabama, and then I've been back here working since 2012.
That's amazing. That's a great story.
Oh, it was great, man. I mean, I basically spent my whole 20s in a van with my friends playing music. It was a blast.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely sounded like you did a bunch of stuff that you loved. So, at least you gave it a shot,
Yeah, totally.
Speaking of shot, one of your earlier film credits here. Now, this isn't a film that I saw, but I remember seeing the cover box, Disney Shot Kennedy. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was the first real on-camera experience that I had. And there was a local guy who doesn't live here anymore, and his name was David Lawrence, and he wrote, produced, directed, and starred in this indie movie that he wanted to do. He had this vision, and he asked me to be part of it. And of course, there was no pay or anything like that. I was in grad school at the time at Alabama, but I still had, plenty of friends in Atlanta, and that's where we shot it. So I just crashed in a friend's spare room for a couple of weeks, or I think it was about a month. And we worked on this movie together. It never saw the light of day. It won some festivals, but it never got picked up for distribution or anything like that. And then I never really understood why, but David never really pushed to make it available in any way, shape, or form. I always just figured at some point it would show up on iTunes or something at least, but it never did. So those of us that were in it saw it, and like our parents saw it. That's it. Nobody else ever saw it.
The funny thing is, I feel like I actually have seen like a DVD cover box at some point. I feel like it was something that I saw like on a Blockbuster shelf, some time ago. Because I kind of remember, doesn't the cover box have like Mickey and some blood, like blood shots and stuff like that? So the cover box, I mean, I remember seeing it. So that's why I brought it up, because I've always been fascinated. I mean, I don't know what the film is about, but just the Shot Kennedy part. I've always been fascinated with that whole event. I seek out very many documentaries about that whole deal. But then like the image of Mickey and like I don't know what it was. I think maybe just that evening when I saw it, I was like, maybe not in the mood for something like this. But it definitely caught my eye at some point. So it's funny you say that it never got picked up, because I feel like I have seen a physical copy at some point.
I haven't talked to David in years, and it could be that he, printed some off or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I've still got my copy that he burned for me years ago, but it was a really funny, sort of quirky comedy. It had a very sort of 90s indie feel, even though we shot it in the mid 2000s. But it was about this really quirky group of friends that run a conspiracy theory newspaper. And then this evil rich guy, we've gotten too onto him, and so he buys the newspaper and tries to shut it down, and we fight ultimately unsuccessfully to save the paper. But in and amongst all those hijinks, there's a lot of really funny stuff and a lot of really sweet stuff that happened with the characters' interactions. But it was about conspiracy theories and the underground network and sort of the radical 60s hippie sort of stuff. But it was a fun movie. I would love for people to be able to see it. And if it's out there on DVD, that's cool to hear.
Yeah, I mean, there's a demographic for it for sure. I mean, have you considered just uploading it on YouTube?
It's not my property.
I see.
It all belongs to David. I mean, and that's what I'm saying. Like, it seems interesting to me that hasn't happened yet. I'm not really sure why, because a lot of us worked really hard on it.
Yeah, I'd love to see it. I am very interested in this project for sure. So,
Cool.
we have each other's contact information. So if that ever comes to see the light of day, again, I would love to see it.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Now, you've worked on a lot of different shows, a lot of which I have heard about, obviously, Dynasty, Nashville, Halt and Catch Fire. What were some of your favorite sets to be on?
Ozark was really cool because I got to, I had a scene with Jason Bateman, and I've grown up watching his work just like my entire life. He used to do a bunch of sitcoms in the 80s when he was a kid, and I think we're basically the same age. He might be a few years older than me, I'm not sure, but I sort of grew up watching this guy work. And so to meet him in person was really neat, and he was very funny and friendly. And that same day I was shooting Ozark, I didn't get to act with, but I got to spend a lot of time with Laura Linney
Ooh.
and Peter Mullen and Janet McTeer, and just the kindest, most down-to-earth people, some of the kindest, most down-to-earth people that I've ever worked with. It was just like, it was a really relaxed set, and this was episode 9 of a 10-episode season, and this is their second season. So they were, the ball was really rolling, and they were getting close to the end, and so it was neat to be a part of that. But I mean, really, any time that I get to work, it's a great day. I'm still, as much as I've been able to do, I'm thankful for all of it. But working as a local actor in Atlanta, a lot of the stuff that I've been getting hired for at this point is more like day player work, where I go in and help facilitate the stories that are being told by the main characters, which means that, I just got to do a movie with Ellen Burstyn, and I got to have scenes with Ellen Burstyn. It's a movie that's coming out, I think, this year, if not this year, next year, called Welcome to Pine Grove, and I got to play her neighbor. It was great, but it was one day's work. And so the joke that a lot of other actors in Atlanta and I are sort of tossing about with each other is that there are these yellow signs all over town that are pointing different productions to set. And they've got codes on them. So it'll be a yellow sign with a big black arrow. And then, like Cobra Kai's, the code was CK. Mm-hmm. So if I was driving to Cobra Kai's set, I would follow the yellow signs that said CK to set. I got to work on Cobra Kai for episode 10 was the whole week. And then I was there for one day for episode 7. So those days I got to follow the signs to work. All the other days I'm driving by all these signs on my way to my day job, teaching at Kennesaw. So some days you get to follow the signs, some days you don't.
Yeah.
But the days when you do are good days, no matter what you're working on.
Now, I think that'd be a great transition into Cobra Kai. So, for those that, may have forgotten it came back out in May. So you were in episode 7, All Valley. You're one of the board members, mm-hmm. Braun, and also, the 10th episode, the season finale, which is titled Mercy. You said that you were on set for episode 10 all week?
Yes. Yeah, they shot that for a week.
And then because there was snow. There was some weather as well, right, for that week?
There was, but they also, myself and my fellow All Valley Karate Tournament board committees have one small scene in episode 10 with Daniel when he and his daughter sort of convinced themselves that they actually should go to the tournament. Mm-hmm. And so when they first show up, we greet them. But it's a very short scene, and that's the only dialogue we had in that. But they had us in for all of the coverage for the entire tournament. So we're sitting,
I see.
You can sort of see us here and there. We're sort of sitting at the back judges table with the iconic score chart that shows the different fighters advancing through the tournament. We're back there the whole time.
Did you ever find it interesting that they never had a Johnny Lawrence championship poster as well, kind of like they had Daniels?
Yeah, I've seen, as the show's been out and these different, your podcast and different Facebook groups and stuff have popped up. It's been really cool to see all of the heated, inspired discussions about all this stuff. At the time, I got to say, it didn't register that was absent. But that's interesting that so many people have noticed that. By the time we came in for episode 7, I of course knew the show was happening. I had auditioned for, I want to say, 3 other roles that all went to amazing actors, and you know, I'm glad that I got the role that I did. But I knew about the show, and when you audition for shows, especially here in Atlanta, the process is you almost always a self tape. So they don't send you the whole script, but they'll send you like 2 pages or 4 pages or something like that. And then you just have a camera pointed at you, and you have a friend off camera reading all of the other characters' dialogue, and you just perform that little part of the scene on the tape, and you email it off, and then hopefully the process will advance from there. So having auditioned for these other roles, I had read parts of the script. Everything that I read was just hilarious and perfect. And I'm a huge Karate Kid fan, and I just wanted this gig so bad. So when I found out that I booked the role of Ron, that was really exciting. Now, coming in episode 7, they'd already been working on the show for months. And I knew that we had this big scene with Johnny Lawrence and Daniel LaRusso, so, you know, they walk in the room and they introduce themselves to us, and they were both super gracious and amazing and relaxed. And it was a great set to work on. But I was trying to kind of keep it together, because it's like, it would be one thing to, you know, oh, wow, I have a scene with Billy Zabka. How cool is that? It's like, no, I get to talk to Johnny Lawrence and the Karate Kid. Like, you're waiting for Luke Skywalker to walk in or something. I mean, it was incredible.
Yeah, they're iconic characters.
Yeah, absolutely. And characters that I grew up with. And I actually got to, when we were shooting episode 7, I was sitting beside Ralph for a large portion of the day. I mean, I think shooting that scene took almost all of that day, because they did a lot of coverage, which was cool. They shot it. It seemed to me that they shot it more like a film than a TV show. So they shot a ton of coverage and a ton of different angles, more than I usually see in a shoot for a TV show. So I got to sit with Ralph for, you know, a lot of the day, and he was very nice. And at one point in time, where I felt like I wasn't going to annoy him or anything like that, I was able to tell him that the summer that the Karate Kid came out, my dad had gotten a new job, and our family had to move to a different state, and I had to be the new kid for the first time ever in my life. And so that summer, the Karate Kid came out. And so that movie, like, really resonated with me and really sort of got me through a challenging time in my young life. And I was able to tell him that, and that was cool. I also still have the original soundtrack on vinyl.
Wow, that's amazing.
And I wore that thing out, man. I mean, I loved it. But I got to tell him that too. And I remember he clapped me on the shoulder and said, "My man." That was cool.
Now, you said you spent most of the day sitting next to Mr. Macchio. Did he drink a lot of coffee?
Mm-hmm. No, I think it was mainly water.
Oh, interesting.
I know that Billy was losing his voice. And so he was drinking a lot of hot water with lemon and honey, and he was just trying to get through it. And you can even, it actually facilitates the scene very well. But if you are aware of the fact that he was losing his voice when you watch him make that speech about what Cobra Kai means to him, he's really hoarse.
Yeah.
And so he was trying to make it through the day. And he had just said that he'd said that the day before they had just shot this huge scene where he was screaming a lot. My guess, I don't know for sure, but my guess is that what they shot the day before was the scene where his car gets set on fire, and so he's screaming, "Where's Daniel?" or whatever, and he's in a furious rage and goes to the LaRusso house. My guess is that's what they shot the day before, because he's screaming his brains off in that.
Yeah, it kind of is. It does a little Batman, where's Daniel?
Yeah, exactly. And my favorite part, I mean, that's such a good episode. One of my favorite things about that sequence is the fact that, and maybe I'm wrong, but I could go back and watch it again, but I'm pretty sure that when Johnny's car gets set on fire, that happens at night.
Yes.
And then the next time we see Johnny, he's just standing in Daniel's yard waiting for him to come outside. So I don't know how long he's been standing there, but it could have been just 8 hours of rage waiting for Daniel to wake up and get his little espresso and see him,
Yeah.
It's just so fun. It's so smart.
That's funny because I feel like most of the comments and discussions I've seen online, people are like, did he, get lost, go to a gas station, look up a map, because he's just so technologically challenged, so he couldn't use a GPS. So I like
Yeah, right.
I like, some others were like, oh, he's knocking down every door looking for Daniel. But I like the idea of him just standing there for hours, just in rage, waiting to see Daniel through
Exactly.
the window. I like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Can you speak about some of those other roles that you auditioned for?
I I don't know. I'm really happy with Ron because he, well, for one thing, he's got they haven't gotten in touch with me yet, and hopefully they do. But he does, have the potential to come back for season 2, which would be really cool. The other ones were just sort of smaller, like one-off scenes. But I'm friends with most of the actors that ended up booking those roles, and they did
Okay,
such wonderful jobs. I
sure.
wouldn't want to, put my brain over their amazing work because they all did so well. And actually, one of the guys I've seen at subsequent auditions just for other stuff, commercials and stuff, and we've become like pretty good friends. So every time I see him in an audition, we'll make sure to see each other out and say hi, and just check in and see what we've been up to work wise and stuff.
Now, for the character of Ron, were you guys told like each role of your characters what they played? Because your character has a gavel, so I feel like he's like some sort of like the head of the board. Or do you have any insight onto that?
The way that it was written in the script, Ron is the president of the All Valley Karate
Oh, okay.
Tournament. But then, of course, that's kind of the interesting dynamic there is that Ron is technically the one that's in charge, but then of course Daryl is the one that is making things happen and calling all the shots, and there's sort of a minor humorous conflict there between those two characters. I love the whole thing about changing the color of the mats. I mean, stuff like that was just like, that's why Cobra Kai is so special. I mean, you've got to be a super fan of Karate Kid to be able to go like that deep and insightful about the source material, and then be able to extend those ideas in new and interesting ways. I think that's why the show's so smart. I think John and Hayden and Josh just did such a fantastic job putting this material together.
It really is. I mean, the world feels very lived in, and this is only season 1. They
Mm-hmm.
put so much thought into the writing, and it's so rich. Um, Now, with the board, the committee, were you given a backstory? Like, I know we don't spend too much time with Ron, but is this one of those cases where you had to kind of come up with your own backstory, and perhaps like how long Ron has been working for the committee and his relationship with Daniel and things of that nature?
I think. I mean, the shorter answer is no. If it had been something that I had needed to know to help facilitate, the motivation of a line, or what my character's opinion is about something that's happening in the story, then yeah, of course. I mean, so for instance, and as an actor, that's usually how I approach any sort of material, is that if something happens like Daniel LaRusso enters the room, I've got to have a really strong understanding of what my character's opinion is of Daniel. Same thing with Johnny, same thing with anybody else that I'm speaking to. So obviously, Ron loves and respects Daniel and looks up to him as a hero, and he's one of the, icons of this karate tournament. I don't know for sure. I never really talked about it with the writers, and it's not explicit in the script, but I always just sort of assumed that maybe like the All Valley Karate Tournament committee isn't their full-time job. So it's like a volunteer something, like everyone has real jobs, but then you're also like, you're president of the Elks Lodge. That's just like the side gig. It's your hobby. It's this thing you do in addition to whatever you do. So I just sort of thought that was amusing and sort of looked at it in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. So as we get ready to wrap up here, I definitely have some more questions. You said you spent a lot of time sitting with Mr. Machio as well. What were your interactions with Mr. Zapka like?
So cool. Both of them were so kind and just present and relaxed and grounded. For people like that to be in the industry as long as they have and have all these great, I mean, gosh, Billy Zapkin has been in some amazing, he was in European Vacation and Just One of the Guys, and movies that I grew up with. And, you know, I grew up watching his work. And so, you know, obviously being around either one of them was kind of daunting at first, but they were just so cool. Everyone was so cool. They both went above and beyond anything that I expected of them in terms of just being friendly and gracious. At the end, when we were shooting episode 10, the only thing that they had left to shoot besides the tournament were the beach scenes. And I don't know if that was just the high school kids on the beach at that party, or if that also included the other stuff that they shot at Stone Mountain, which would be like all of the, you know, when Daniel and
Robbie
are in the woods.
Uh-huh.
That I'm pretty sure all of that stuff was at the same location, and they were sort of, because of the snow, they kept having to delay those sequences. So they had that left. But other than that, that was going to be a wrap for a lot of characters. I mean, there are a lot of Cobra Kai kids that are in a lot of scenes, but maybe only have like one line or two and weren't at that beach party. So that was a wrap for us. That was a wrap for, you know, half of Cobra Kai. That was a wrap for a ton of people. And so on that last day, Billy was walking around taking pictures with everybody for himself because he wanted the pictures. And, you know, I asked him if I could get a picture with him, and he said, yeah, of course. And I got a picture on my phone, and he got some pictures on his phone. And I mean, stuff like that. Like, he was just, and on top of that, Billy and Ralph were both always around. There are other projects that I've worked on where when it's time, the actors will come and do their job and do their scenes with you. But then other than that, you just never see them. They're off. They've got a trailer somewhere in some sort of sequestered area, and you may not be allowed in that area. But Billy and Ralph were just always, they were always around. And they were both, they couldn't have been kinder or cooler. It was a really fun experience to get to spend all that time with those guys.
You reminded me of a moment on the show when Daniel and Robbie do go training, and there's that one moment where Robbie catches Daniel, you know, trying to do that one-handed, you know, handstand or whatever. And you mentioned Luke Skywalker earlier. Did you ever see that meme where they put the side by side of Luke also doing that one-handed handstand? And
I never did, but I always took that as an homage to that sequence in Empire Strikes Back, which again is just another one of the many ways that John, Hayden, and Josh just did such a good job with Cobra Kai. And they're just, I mean, the writing is just so smart. That's another perfect example of something that like takes some amazing source material, but then also, you know, modifies it and lifts it up into an even like newer and in a lot of ways cooler thing, you know, to be able to wink at Star Wars in such a unique way like that. So smart.
What are some other projects, if you could speak on it, that listeners can keep an eye on for that you're involved with? You already mentioned Welcome to Pine Grove, was it?
It's a Ellen Burstyn movie. It's an all-star cast. I was on it for a day, and it was one of the last days of the shoot. And so everyone had wrapped except for Ms. Burstyn and a local actor that plays her grandson named Matt Barnes, who's a great actor and a very kind guy. Everyone else had wrapped. But the cast is Ellen Burstyn, James Caan, Anne Margaret, Jane Curtin, Loretta Devine, Christopher Lloyd, Elizabeth Mitchell, French Stewart, Gaines, that's the dude that played Malachi in the original Children of the Corn.
Or even Can't Buy Me Love.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so there's this all-star cast.
And Back to the Future, actually.
Yeah.
Scram McFly, I'm putting in. I think it was his line at the Enchantment Under the Sea dance. Christopher Lloyd, that was the biggest name that stuck out because I'm a huge Back to the Future fan. So that's pretty amazing.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, that's a great cast.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't, you know, like I said, I was only on there for a day and they had wrapped the day before. and it all headed home. But that's a project that, like I said, I don't know for sure, and they're not going to tell little old me. I'll just see it when I see it. But my impression is that they're trying to crank it out and have it ready for this coming holiday season. But I could totally be wrong. I'm not sure. If it's not out this year, it'll be out next year. And then I also got to play Natalia Dyer's dad in a movie called Yes, God, Yes, which will be out next year at some point in time. That was a really cool project. Natalia Dyer plays Nancy on Stranger Things. And I've got a short scene in the first episode of this last season of House of Cards. And, and then also, I'm playing a teacher on a new Netflix show that'll be out next year called Raising Dion. And Michael B. Jordan is one of the stars connected to that project. And so that'll be out next year at some point in time too. I haven't started shooting that yet. My first time on set will be next week. And then the character could possibly come back for other episodes, but I'm not privy to that information just yet. But that's all the stuff I got coming down the pike. And then hopefully, I would love to come back for Cobra Kai season 2. I mean, I don't know if there's any room in the storytelling for the All Valley Karate Tournament Committee, but if there is, that'd be a blast too.
And that wraps up my conversation with Mr. Matt Lewis. Again, I want to thank him for coming on the show and spending some time talking about, the work that he's done and future projects as well. And Mr. Lewis was a joy to speak with. There's a bit of a age difference. I don't think he's that much older than me, but I feel we could have talked about 80s movies forever. And there was one thing that I wish that I could have spoken to him more about was more about music, because there were some drops of other things like Green Day and but also 80s music, and I feel like that's something that we probably could have done as a bonus episode to his interview. But yes, thank you again, Mr. Lewis, for giving me the opportunity, and thank you everybody, all the listeners, for tuning in, for supporting our show. One of the ways that you can also support us is by spending a couple of minutes and leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or whatever app that you use, if it does have that feature, leaving a review or a thumbs up or something to that effect. It really helps out the visibility of the show. Even if you don't want to leave an actual review, please leave a star rating. Again, that will kind of bump us up just a little bit more. And if you want other people to find our coverage and join in all the what we hope is fun, just spend a little bit of time just leaving the star rating. And so thank you everybody for your continued support. We have an amazing group page. If you are not already in it, it's www.CobraKai.TVAMB group, and you spell out the words period. And if you want to follow us on the social medias, on Twitter, we are at Cobra Kai Pod, and on Instagram at Cobra Kai Podcast. So a bit of a difference there, and just be careful because it was one of those things that one of the handles wasn't available. So I had to pick something else. But if you follow us on Instagram, we, not too long ago, we did our second Instagram Live quote-unquote takeover, where Mr. Voss Sanchez, who plays Nestor, the convenience store clerk, he joined me for a little Q&A. And funny I say little because it went on for 2 hours, because Instagram limits us to an hour, but we were having such a good time, and we were drinking I was drinking Coors Banquet, and he had a beer with me, so I can say that I had a beer with Mr. Sanchez. But there's things like that we do. I believe by the time this particular episode is out, I would have also done another Instagram Q&A with Miss Erin Bradley Danger, and also following that, we did a live watch of Cobra Kai Episode 3 in our Facebook group page. So just another reason for you to join if you have Facebook. You don't have to be active, but we share a lot of different contents, and some of which are exclusive to the group. So that might be something you'd consider in terms of joining our group. And that's going to do it for now. And hopefully you subscribe to the show first and foremost, because we will continue pumping out interviews and bonus content to quench your thirst for Cobra Kai material. And if you also want to follow my other Twitter account, it's @Podstalgic, where I review movies. So that's going to do it for me. And again, I can't thank you guys enough for your continued support. And hopefully you subscribe to the show so that way you can get all the latest updates for anything that we release, whether it's a previously recorded episode on another feed or, original material that we cover for Cobra Kai Companion. So thanks again for everybody's support. I'll see you guys next time.